So as the presidential election cycle kicks off, we are seeing misinformation spread rapidly online and an insurgent candidate capitalizing on it. If that sounds familiar, it is because we've seen it before. Did we learn any lessons from 2016, or is 2024 already shaping up to be a repeat? For that, I want to bring in Brian Fallon. He was National Press Secretary for Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2016, so he is no stranger to combating misinformation. He's now the co-founder and executive director of Demand Justice. Okay, Brian, this is not a conversation about the Supreme Court. We'll have many of those.
Take that hat off.
Take that hat off. I wanted to ask you, I mean, you are very familiar with insurgent candidates, say, Bernie Sanders, for example, in 2016, misinformation spreading online as it did in 2016. This year is obviously a little different. RFK is not Bernie Sanders, not suggesting that, but it does feel a little bit like we're undervaluing or underestimating what Russia could be doing online. There are some other candidates who are running in the primary. What do you make of the similarities and differences between now and 2016?
Well, in terms of differences, the biggest one, I think, is that RFK Jr. is not Bernie Sanders, like you said. I think that RFK Jr. is guaranteed a certain amount of oxygen in the political conversation because of his family name. He's going to be able to get cable bookings. He's going to get a certain amount of press just because of who he is. He's also going to have a certain amount of name ID with Democratic voters that I think is going to get him a certain minimum level of support. And then there's always a desire to have a sort of protest vote out there. So it's not surprising to see somebody get 15 to 20% in a Democratic poll of Democratic voters at this stage of the election. I think back to 2012, as you'll recall, I think Barack Obama lost 40% of the primary vote in the West Virginia primary, and I think he did okay in the 2012 re-election. So the first thing I think we should do is not assume that RFK Jr. getting 20% is such cause for concern that it means that people are buying into his vaccination disinformation. So we need to contextualize it that way. But the larger problem, though, of disinformation is a real one. We certainly dealt with it in 2016, and it's not gone away. In fact, the situation has probably worsened. But I do think that there are some strategies that the Biden administration and the Biden campaign can deploy to try to counteract that. So
let's talk about that, because, I mean, you were in a prominent senior role in the Clinton campaign. When this was happening in a way that people weren't really tracking it, we were underestimating it, maybe you weren't, but a lot of people out there were. What kind of advice would you give the Biden team about how to address disinformation, misinformation that's traveling online about his candidacy, anything that could prevent him from winning re-election?
So I think that the first thing that the Biden administration has going for it is that the number one sort of shield that you can have to disinformation campaigns is having a sturdy brand and a built-in reputation and being a known quantity with the voters that makes you a little bit, not totally immune, but it helps you fend off a lot of disinformation campaigns that just won't ring true with the public, because this president in particular, I feel like, is a known quantity.
Right. So if people were like suggesting something about him that just doesn't seem believable, people are less likely to buy into it.
What do we know about Joe Biden? Joe Biden, the public sees him as a family man. They see him as a man of integrity. They see him as a deal cutter that likes to work with the other side. Those are sort of fundamental aspects of a personality that's been on the political scene for like 40 years. And so that helps him, I think, withstand the vicissitudes of a news cycle and disinformation campaigns that might be waged by foreign actors, and a Republican House majority that's actively trying to throw banana peels in his path. And so when you have that kind of reputation, I think it's a big reason why a lot of, for instance, the Hunter Biden stuff is not sticking to this president. It doesn't ring true with the public that finds him to be a man of integrity, not a corrupt politician, and somebody who in general is a family man. And so they're inclined to see the president as somebody who's looking after his son, not somebody that's in cahoots with his son in some kind of corrupt dealings.
It feels like what we've kind of learned a little bit over the years is that some of these disinfo actors, whether it's Russia or others, try to feed into something the public may already believe or have an openness to believing. So to me, that seems like the vulnerabilities are things about President Biden being older or whether he's up to the job. What are the other things you think that people should be aware of that these bad actors could try to push?
Well, especially now, one place where it's worsened and evolved even since 2016 is deepfakes, the phenomenon of having completely altered video and AI-generated footage. So you could see something where trying to leverage that age issue, the president tripping at the Air Force commencement the other day, trying to turn that into something and maybe adding in some enhanced elements there to try to make the video footage seem worse than it was. That's something that sort of technology has developed in a way that wasn't even there in 2016. And so that's a concern. I think that there's a few things that the Biden administration and the Biden campaign should be doing, and I think they already recognize. Number one is you need to play these sort of issues to a draw with the mainstream legacy media outlets.
Yeah.
You need to work the refs.
How do you do that?
It's working the refs. The Republicans are very good at it, and we're a little bit inconsistent and uneven when it comes to it. But it's about shaming the legacy media outlets out of granting this stuff oxygen and covering it. Sometimes, political reporters that know better, that know that these are sort of fake-generated controversies, will say, well, people are talking about it, so we have to cover it. And the Biden administration and the campaign re-election officials should not accept that. They should shame those reporters out of covering that stuff, contextualize it, provide polling that robs it of any political significance to try to starve those sort of lines of coverage from being animated by mainstream press attention. But that alone will not do it, because the evening newses and the New York Times of the world don't dictate the conversation by themselves anymore. And so that means also trying to own or compete, not cede the playing field on organic and social channels. And as you know, your former colleague, Rob Flaherty, who's a friend of mine, I think he's a very inventive guy. He's the head of the president's
digital strategy. He runs the digital strategy, yeah.
And he's got a great team around him. And so I would expect to see more pairings of Joe Biden and Olivia Rodrigo and BTS, and you have to be on TikTok and you have to be on those platforms.
You have to be in all the places. Now, if you were advising them on how seriously they should take some of these candidates, it's not just that it is RFK Jr., it is also Marianne Williamson. All of these people we can laugh about, but how concerned should people be about what chunks of the vote they might take or how disruptive they could be to the race?
Not very. I think one thing about Democrats that your old colleagues in the Obama administration used to point to is we have this chronic bedwetting problem.
And the polar coaster and bedwetting because of the polar coaster.
And so you have this dual sort of situation where political reporters need to inject some kind of controversy into the Biden re-election situation. So first it was, is he going to run? Is he too old to run? Now he's announced, and so that storyline is starved for attention. So now it's like, well, the RFK Jr. is polling above expectation. And so if you're a reporter at Politico or The Hill or Roll Call, you can easily dial up a bedwetting Democratic consultant and get them to give you a quote that sort of validates the premise of your story, and thus begins a media narrative around, Biden having problems on his left and Dems being in disarray. But I don't think that this is a real problem. I think that RFK's support owes itself to name ID and the sort of protest vote phenomenon. Those Democrats will come home when this shifts from being a theoretical poll in a Democratic primary to a general election where it's a choice election between Biden and either Trump or Ron DeSantis. Those Democrats will come home. Joe Biden unquestionably will end up with 94-95% of the Democratic vote. So I don't care what a poll at this point out says. I don't care that RFK Jr. is getting 20%. That's not really cause for concern.
Good advice. Don't bedwet. I promise the next time we talk, we will talk about court expansion and the Supreme Court. But
Deal.
thank you for sharing your expertise on campaigns as well.
Thanks, Jen.